Week 3, Part 1. 4.1, Reading and Summarizing Narratives. 4.2, Responding to Narratives. 4.1, Reading and Summarizing Narratives. Narratives and Nonfiction. Now that you have practiced reading fiction closely and writing a summary, we will look at how those skills transfer to reading narratives. Most of what we read on a daily basis and as part of our formal education is nonfiction, which can range from academic research in the form of scholarly peer-reviewed articles to narratives that can be creative nonfiction. While genres vary, similar techniques can be used to read both fiction and nonfiction. The skills of close and critical reading apply to all texts, including visual. Understanding what close and critical reading are and how to perform both will allow you to create your own approach and process, which will result in stronger reading, better notes, stronger summaries, and better responses. Understanding the differences between fiction and nonfiction, as well as the genres within each, will also facilitate the development of a broader understanding of all literacy and the means of creating and distributing knowledge and information. While fiction shares stories that allow for wholly imaginary events to drive the action, nonfiction intends to recount events as they occurred or offer information that draws from concrete facts. When reading nonfiction closely and critically, it is important to understand the intention of the genre and the text, as well as the intention of your reading. When reading fiction, look for the main events and ideas that advance the plot. Similarly, when reading nonfiction, look for key points that highlight the information being delivered or described, or the arguments, interpretations, or evaluations being offered. Nonfiction comes in many forms. Academic writing is often published as peer-reviewed articles in scholarly journals, which we will engage later in the term. Narratives, on the other hand, are nonfiction, but they can apply elements of fiction. Reading narratives will allow you to start applying close reading practices with nonfiction, but the narratives will also provide mirrors to demonstrate ways to tell a good story, which can help you as you tell your own story. Narratives. Nonfiction writing is used to share information through formal and informal learning experiences. Nonfiction texts include textbooks, scholarly publications, memoirs, and IKEA directions, to name a few. But genres such as memoirs and narratives, while nonfiction include elements of story and apply many of the same techniques used to engage readers in fiction. But narratives still need outlining and organization so that the moral and intention remain the focus, and so that they don't read like a stream of consciousness diary entry. When reading a narrative, then the story elements of fiction can be noted in addition to considering the critical and contextual concepts identified in nonfiction. In fact, elements of fiction, such as identifying a moral of the story or the climactic moment of change, often overlap with concepts like the thesis and the finding or result that alert readers to the important points in a nonfiction text. When you read narrative to write a summary, you can look for the story elements of fiction with an eye out for the informative elements of nonfiction. And remember that summary does not include interpretation or analysis, so when reading a narrative with the intention of summary, focus on the elements of the text that you deem pivotal to the moral and plot. To practice, read Salvation by Langston Hughes and write a one-paragraph summary, question 1. Although nonfiction, because the text is a narrative, annotate the text looking for major plot points using story elements such as exposition, rising action, conflict, climax, falling action, and resolution. Even though there are various factors, including a moral or theme, starting with the major plot points is a great way to summarize a narrative. The fact that Hughes' story is true can add other elements to the text and allow for the inclusion of context. However, for our purpose of writing a summary, context is unnecessary. In addition to providing an opportunity to practice summarizing, Salvation also allows us to see an example of a narrative. While Hughes' narrative isn't focused on literacy, the techniques used to share a meaningful event in a clear, compelling, and concise manner provide an example of how narratives can function. As we shift to the practice of summarizing nonfiction texts for use in academic writing, we also want to start including the expectations of MLA formatting. When you begin the summary of Salvation, for instance, be sure to use a signal phrase including the author and formatted title to introduce the text. Here is an example. In Salvation, Langston Hughes recounts his experience as a 12-year-old attending a church revival with his Auntie Reed. Also format any direct source material and include a citation with the paragraph. Although Hughes kept waiting serenely for Jesus, waiting, nothing happened. Paragraph 7. Any source material you summarize for purposes beyond your own notes should include the standard expectations of the formatting style associated with the assignment, which is MLA for ENC 1101. Because you are only uploading the summary for the task and not the literacy narrative at this point, you do not need to include a complete reference for the work, but in all formal submissions for university-level work, a reference page, works cited for MLA, is required and should include all the sources referenced in the submission. Although Salvation does not include literacy as a frame for the narratives we explored in the DALN provide examples of literacy narrative. To see an example of a literacy narrative, read My Relationship with Literacy and write a summary, question 2. Then read Moisturize Twice Daily, which you will summarize as well, question 3. The inclusion of MLA formatting suggests that at least one of the narratives was written for a university-level course, not unlike ENC 1101. While the genre of a literacy narrative includes expectations, each assignment is specific and distinctive. Even each instructor's expectations will be specific. After reading the 2 sample narratives, think about how each product fits with the expectations for our literacy narrative. Consider which aspects of the assignment each narrative fulfills, and what would need to be modified to fit our assignment. Do they appear to be organized around a central question as our assignment expects? Write a few sentences discussing how the sample narratives compare to our assignment. Question 4. Writing section summaries and noting major plot points as you read each sample will help you create a strong ground for your summary, but also look at the story elements in conjunction with the larger intention, which is to fulfill the assignment. For instance, the climax or moral of the story might look more like a nonfiction thesis than a fiction moral. Combining elements from different types of writing in order to tell a good story while still fulfilling the expectations of an academic assignment is a great example of moves you will want to make in your literacy narrative. Your story. Now that you have read 3 narratives, think of a story about a personal experience you had that includes reading or writing, and tell us the story in 1 paragraph. Try to think of that paragraph as a short summary that would outline the major plot points you would build into a complete narrative. Question 5. Use what you know about telling a good story to focus on important plot points that wrap around an experience with reading or writing. When you construct your complete literacy narrative, you will have space to include a summary of the text and the experience, but for this paragraph, focus on the context of the larger story instead of summarizing the text you read or wrote. In addition to helping build your literacy narrative for Project 1, practicing close reading and construction of narratives also develops skills that we'll use and expand in the next projects and beyond. Specifically, Project 2 will build on these skills by applying them to scholarly, peer-reviewed texts. Spiraling deeper into these practices across texts and genres will prepare you for the advanced reading and writing expected in ENC 1102 and across all academic disciplines. Complete all 5 parts included in Assignment 4.1 and upload your considered and polished responses to Canvas. Number 1, write a 1-paragraph summary of Salvation. Number 2, write a 1-paragraph summary of My Relationship with Literacy from the DALN. Number 3, write a 1-paragraph summary of Moisturize Twice Daily from the DALN. Number 4, how do the sample narratives compare to our literacy narrative assignment? Number 5, write a 1-paragraph summary of a personal literacy event. 4.2, Responding to narratives. Revisiting narratives. Now that we have practiced summarizing narratives, we will practice writing responses in the same way we responded to our fiction summaries. When you read and reviewed Salvation, your goal was to write a summary. Your first reading may have looked like this sample annotated reading of Salvation. Now read Salvation again with the goal of allowing yourself to have a response that you can define and explain. Remember that when you responded to the Creatures reading, you considered these questions. How did the piece make you feel? Did it remind you of anything, personal or any other text? How else did you supplement the text? What do you think it meant? What else could it have meant? Did you like it? Why or why not? Other considerations can also be included in your response to the text, given its function as a sample of a narrative. Within the context of this assignment, you can also read for moves or choices that Hughes makes to engage his readers and connect his story so that you can consider how similar moves might strengthen your narrative. For this assignment, context related to Hughes' life or the time and place where the texts were written do not need to be considered. Question 1. In addition to rereading Salvation and writing a one-paragraph response, reread My Relationship with Literacy and Moisturize Twice Daily, and write a one-paragraph response to each. Questions 2 and 3. Focus on your reaction to each piece. Consider how it impacted you and why. Also consider what the sample narratives did well in relation to our academic assignment. Instead of summarizing how they did or did not fulfill the assignment, consider the moves each made and how they were effective in engaging you as a reader. What made you want to keep or stop reading? What made you feel connected to or disconnected from the author? What elements helped engage your interest and create a compelling story? Specifically, what moves and choices the author made to appeal to the DALN readers, and perhaps to the instructor and the peers in this course. One story ties the title to a point in the paper and then brings us full circle to the same phrase in the conclusion, which helps us identify the moral of the story. What other choices do you see in the text? Perhaps some that work and some that do not. And how do the choices or moves function within the genre and in relation to a given audience? Question 4. Finally, now that you have summarized and responded to the 3 sample narratives, revisit the one-paragraph narrative you constructed. Ask similar questions of your summary. Could this be expanded for use as one of the literacy events explored in your narrative? What moves do you make and for whom or what? What worked well and what didn't? Question 5. While you respond, think about your process and what elements of your overall approaches to reading and writing have worked so far. In addition to reflecting on our literacy experiences, a goal of this and other assignments in ENC 1101 is to include thinking about thinking. Reflection and meta-reflection are important personal practices and support deep learning and understanding, which are some of the main reasons you are here at USF. To support this aim, make the most of the opportunities embedded throughout the course to deepen your understanding of your writing process and reading approaches. Assignment 4.2. Complete all 5 parts included in Assignment 4.2 and upload your considered and polished responses to Canvas. Number 1. Write a one-paragraph response to Salvation. Number 2. Write a one-paragraph response to My Relationship with Literacy. Number 3. Write a one-paragraph response to Moisturize Twice Daily. Number 4. What did the sample narratives do well in relation to our academic assignment? Number 5. Write a one-paragraph response to your own summary.